Hi, I'm Fee Peel and my pronoun is Fee. I'm a lived experience counsellor, peer worker and supervisor. I am also a white, round, short-haired, red-headed NB wearing a yellow t-shirt and black faux leather jacket. Welcome to this presentation, The Role of Self-Determined Arts-Based Recovery Alternatives and the NDIS. Art is the highest form of hope. Gerhard Richter, 1982. Image description. Skyscrapers in a construction crane juxtaposed against a spring sky. In the foreground are several trees and a wide flowering jacaranda in full bloom, overlaid by a deep indigo filter. Image credit, Fee Peel. Written and recorded on Ngunnawal lands, I pay my respects to First Nations elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. I'd like to also take a moment to acknowledge the lived experience voices in the room and thank you for sharing my journey and for allowing me to share with you. The lived experience voice that is present throughout this presentation has given their express permission for their story to be used. But before we ask what happened to you in June 1997, I'd like to note that the image on the screen has changed just slightly and is now overlaid by a filter that casts the trees in hues of purple and indigo and the skyscraper behind in hues of pink, purple and gold. My life was in tatters. My beloved university theatre lecturers I so desperately wanted to please were shocked when I said goodbye. It was so hard to reconcile. I had been thriving. How had it all come crashing down? How had it led to such deep, dark emptiness? How was it that 4 weeks prior to this, I was sipping Vienna coffees from the Cafe of the Gods outside the drama lab at the ANU and enjoying the wintry sun before class? How was it that I could barely move my legs or convince myself to get out of bed, to just breathe? I had been thriving. I was moving on, or so I thought. I had no idea that this world I was falling in love with, the frenzied backstage costume changes as I clipped our leading lady into her corset, the quick hands of 500 between acts with cooped up cast members, the nicknames, the camaraderie and the theatre community that was building around me was about to be cruelly stripped away. The very identity that felt to be the truest self I had ever known was now recast as maladaptive, and now my superpower was being used against me as evidence that it was really my kryptonite. Lived experience voice, unpublished manuscript, 2021. Enter the NDIS. This person who then, more than 20 years later, finally received the NDIS in 2019, went on to develop a very complex mental health profile and spent many, many years in and out of mental health inpatient settings. Our image on the screen has changed again just slightly, overlaid by a purple-toned filter. They, people requiring support, may be unaware that they're potentially eligible or too unwell or fearful to engage with the NDIS, unless someone reaches out and builds their trust over time. This quote from the independent review into the NDIS by University of Sydney academics Hancock and Smith-Merry in 2020 addresses the access hurdles in gaining NDIS funding. However, once the participants received funding, they also explored other aspects of the NDIS, including inappropriate NDIS plans, inability to coordinate services, thin markets, poorly trained workforce, and inflexible plans. So let's ask this lived experience voice another less than 12 months on, in June 2020, what's wrong with you? Our image on the screen now stripped of all filters. As I struggled to construct a sentence in order to answer the psychiatrist's persistent line of questioning, she continued to talk at me until I finally exploded in anger. I left the room and tried to de-escalate the situation. I went to my room and tried to engage in some breathing exercises, then left to go to the bathroom. When I had re-emerged, now completely drowning in sensory overload, she and the nun were standing at the door of my room wanting to talk more. I asked them to leave me alone and she began to talk over the top of me. The situation continued to escalate to the point where she was repeatedly saying, "Stop yelling at me." And I was yelling back, "Please, just stop talking and I will stop yelling." In the end, I retreated to a corner of my room, pulled every available blanket and pillow on top of me, stuck my fingers in my ears and tried to sing to block out the sound of her continuing to talk at me. After some time, I realized that she had left the room, but I had also entered a dissociative state. Lived experience voice, Local Health District Accreditation Review, 2020. This participant who was escaping domestic violence had found themselves homeless and in a new regional local health district with no appreciation of the journey thus far, was unable to access their NDIS funding during this time as well. But let's ask them another 12 months on in June 2021, who are you? Our image now overlaid by a filter that turns the green trees purple and the flowering jacaranda and sky aqua. I have found my voice once more through an intensive 4-day community singing workshop at the Song Company at the Walsh Bay Arts Precinct, known as WARF 45. I watched with pride my now 21-year-old daughter as she took on the role of Belle in the production of Beauty and the Beast early this year, realizing a long-held dream of her own. I celebrated my birthday in May with all 3 of my children as we came together for the first time in almost 3 years. I have been invited to join the chorus of the Cooperative's production of Tosca that will open tonight at Pitt Street Uniting Church in the Sydney CBD. The first full-scale production I have performed for in 15 years. I could not conceive of a more stunning way to celebrate 18 months free, not of suicidal ideation, but action upon my mind's own attempts to short-circuit what was once an agonizing interior life, by immersing myself once more into a world I had long despaired I would ever reclaim. Lived experience voice, Ripple Effects blog post, 2021. A happy ending, yes. But what if I told you that this NDIS participant found a house all on their own, managed across 18 months to be suicide attempt free, yet gone through all of these determinants that led them to that hospital admission, had only been able to afford the house, the resettle, the engagement in arts programs because they'd established their own small business, again without any NDIS support or funding. We need to talk about recovery, not therapy, in the NDIS. Whilst music making requires a unique kind of mental organisation that is difficult to account for in simple terms, it is important to consider music's distinctive capacity for the promotion of self-organisation and self-regulation. In conjunction with another person playing music together, mirrors all the capacities for relating that verbal interaction requires, including listening, responding, and initiation. McCaffrey, Edwards, and Fannin, 2011. This person did not engage in music therapy. They were engaged in music and arts engagement. So how can the NDIS be of better recovery value? Self-determined choices in capacity building funding. Acknowledgement that arts engagement is as powerful as arts therapy. Financial support to attend classes and events alone, if so desired, not pay a worker to attend in support, which disempowers independence. Access to short-term accommodation funding that will allow for travel from regional and remote areas for metropolitan place classes and events with or without a support worker. That lived experience voice, it's mine. Give a man a fish, and you will feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you will feed him for a lifetime. Empower us to make our own self-determined choices and activating our own sustained hoped cultures. The results will be magic.